All right, so I mentioned there's a massive article on the front page of thebiglead.com right now. The title of this article or column is, quote, "Have a Take, Don't Suck, Inside the Twisted Minds of Jim Rome's Call-In Empire." The article is written by Kyle Koster. You should follow him on Twitter. He's at Kyle Koster, Koster, Koster. If you want a quick link to the article, I've retweeted it on my feed. This thing is a long-form monster write-up. And in this piece, Kyle interviews the likes of Adam Hawk, Jason Stewart, JT the Brick, Kyle Brandt, Stucknut, Brad in Corona, Sean the Cablinasian, Alvin, Left in Laguna, Mark in Hollywood. As I mentioned, it's a deep, deep dive. Alvin is interviewed for the piece. Like, hell, I didn't even know that Alvin could speak, let alone do an interview. But Kyle got everybody in there. Well, everybody except the flight deck. James Kelly's already gone on record as saying, how good can it be? He didn't interview me. I don't know, maybe it was an oversight, big head. He got everybody but you, big head. And the entire premise of the piece is what makes a good Jim Rome show caller. I'm going to check in with Adam Hawk really quickly. Now, Hawk, you're in the piece. You've read the piece. Hell, somehow you got in the piece. For those who have not read it yet, break it down for me.
Okay, this is like the Bible to being a caller to the Jim Rome show. It's the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen in my life, not just for this topic, but for anything. It is a long read, but if you love this show and you love sports talk radio, it's incredible. He got a bunch of different callers, a bunch of staffers, current and past, and it's just super insightful.
Not the flight deck.
Not the flight deck, but that's what you get for only coming here once a week and never
James
screening
Kelly,
a phone
bad news,
call.
bro. It's still a great piece, even without you.
It's a fantastic piece. So there's just so much insight, so many different takes for how people approach calling this show and their process to it. A lot of callers have a lot of things in common, which was cool to read, and then a lot of callers do things different. Lef has this very interesting story about going to a hotel for 5 to 6 hours at a time to practice his call and then getting kicked out by security because they're like, dude, you've been here for 5 hours. Get the hell out. So that was really interesting. Alvin DeLauro dropped a 4-letter bomb in the article referring to how good you need to have a connection. Yeah, it was awesome. I dropped an F-bomb, not to one-up Alvin, but I did go with the F-bomb.
Why?
I don't know why. I can't remember what I was talking about. But there's an F-bomb in there. Then you've got Brad and Corona.
At least it wasn't gratuitous. Like, you don't even know why you used it.
I only did it once. Brad and Corona.
Use your words, Hawk.
He talks about how he might not have ever called a second time because his first call didn't get the kind of reaction he thought it would. So 6 months went by and then someone emailed and reset it.
Well, what kind of reaction was he looking for? He got a lot of reaction off that first call.
Well, maybe in hindsight and afterwards, because he said it took 6 months for someone to email and reset it, and that whole reset prompted him to call again. And he talks about what would it have been like if I had never called a second time.
The BIC could have been one and done.
Yes, and that's in this article. Then you've got Mark in Hollywood laying out how he was never going to call. He used to listen to the show with his dad all the time, and his dad begged him to call and said, call, please do this. It's my favorite show, call. And then when his dad passed away, he finally did call. And now Mark in Hollywood is a Smackoff champion, and he'll be entering his 9th straight event tomorrow. So that's really cool. This
is all amazing insight. Like, these are anecdotes and stories that even I didn't know.
Right. And you would never know. No one would know unless they read this article. Then the Cablinasian talks about how he used to record all of his phone calls that would air on a cassette tape, and when his brother would come to town, him and his brother would pop in the cassette and just dissect everything and get into it and break it down. It's amazing, and I really enjoyed it. It's a long read, but if you're into it, it'll go really quick. My favorite quote, though, came from Jay Stu, who is the only guy who has multiple Smackoff appearances and also screened calls for 14 years. So he's probably the most insightful person because he's been on both sides of the fence. This is what he wrote, or what he told Kyle Koster in response to the Smackoff. Jay Stu said, I was in my first Smackoff because I was fairly known to Jim. I was never that good. My first Smackoff call was in 1995, and it was infamously bad. My cadence was off. I said basically after every third word. I didn't have a fresh take that day for some reason. They replay that call all the time because it was horrible. When I was working there, Jim used to play that call, which was bad, and then say on the air, and this guy is in charge of letting callers on my show. It became kind of a running joke. So I loved reading that, just you trolling Jay Stu while working on the show, playing his bad call, and then saying, this is the guy who decides who gets on the air. That's amazing.
I forgot about that. That's pretty funny, actually. Like, this is the guy who's going to determine whether or not you're good enough to get on the air. The guy who made one of the worst Smackoff calls ever. He's the one saying, you're not good enough. This is the guy determining, the guy who's at the gate saying, you are not good enough to be on our show.
Comes from Fullerton. Jason, you are in. Good to have you.
Man, Smack. Hey, basically, just like Hollywood, I'm not expecting to walk away with anything, but I am honored to be nominated. I'd like to thank the Academy and my parents for spoiling me, that made me the condescending, selfish smacker that I am. But first of all, I'd like to explain to the new listeners and some of the weaklings who call in on a daily basis what it's like to have game in the jungle. As Doc Mike said, keep calling. It just makes us look better. But just in case you're wondering, if you have the game to come into the jungle, just like Romy says, if you have to ask, you don't. But just a little words of advice here. First of all, when you call in, every other word you use, it should be a glossary term. Keep that up. Second of all, never back up your smack. Third of all, end the call with a huge good night now. Keep calling, weaklings. I know this is probably walking the thin line of blasphemy in the jungle, but I'd like to take down some of the favorites here in the Smackoff today. First of all, Doc Mike. Though he is a legend, he does spend a lot of his time basically pummeling these weaklings who call in from the unemployment line from a payphone, who's basically nobody. It's not hard to take down a weakling, but, Doc Mike does have some smack. Second of all, William from San Diego, Romy, just watch him. He's a reader. Interrupt him. If he starts off with the same word he left off with, that's a clue. And last of all, Rome, I can't really think of this. Who's ranked number 1 in baseball today for college?
Clemson.
Check again.
Basically, that was crap.
Basically.
So basically, in the years ensuing, I would always say, if you want to get on the air, dial this phone number, but understand you have to get through Jay Stu to get to me. The final arbiter as to whether or not you get on the air is the guy who made this telephone call, basically. So that's what Jay Stu was talking about, Adam, in the column.
I love it because I just imagine him sitting where I'm sitting now, listening to that while working on the show and then just getting clowned for it afterwards. But really insightful stuff from Jay Stu, from Mark, from Brad, from Sean. Even JT the Brick and Stucknut are interviewed for this piece. It's at thebiglead.com right now. You mentioned you retweeted it, so it's on your Twitter feed. It's as comprehensive as you could possibly get and super insightful and really fun to read if you're a fan of the show.
Especially if you're getting ready for tomorrow. If you're getting ready for the Smackoff and you wonder what makes these guys tick, Kyle Koster was able to get inside their heads, and they told him the way they go about those phone calls. One more thing, Adam, I just heard from James Kelly, quote, "Sorry, I thought I heard my name, but I'm still reading the article. I started at 8 a.m.
A few things about that. One, we have mentioned that it's long, and I think if you're a fan of the show, you don't want this thing to end. It's very good. And two, James Kelly can't read. He can't read, he can't spell, he can't
Dude,
write.
You didn't even graduate the 13th grade, so what are you doing calling him illiterate? He can't read, he can't spell? Is that what you just said?
I said it. I'm on record with it, and I don't care. He called me a fat stoner that couldn't finish a marathon in under 5 hours. I'm calling him a guy that can't read and can't spell, and the difference between my take on him and his take on me is mine is actually true. He cannot read and cannot spell, so the fact he's still reading is not a surprise.
Yeah, but maybe he can't read and he can't spell, but that doesn't mean that you're not a fat stoner.
But I did finish the marathon in under 5 hours.
How much weight have you gained since then?
20 pounds.
Do you bake?
20 pounds.
Fat stoner. Oh, fat stoner. All right. Thank you very much. You want to check that piece. It's not short. Sometimes less is more, but not in this case. It's an amazing read. Adam Hawk did a really nice job of breaking that down. If you want to get some insight into the Smackoff or some insight into the people who are a part of the Smackoff, check that out. It's on my feed right now. It's a really good read. It's a long read, but it's a really good read. My man went deep. He interviewed a number of the best to ever do it. to get their mindset and their approach.
Basically,
Stu is not one of the best to ever do it. Stu's one of the best guys. Stu is one of the most loyal employees. Stu did a hell of a job for us. He's just not one of the best to ever do it when it comes to picking up the phone. Let's get some quick reaction before we go to hour number 2. Sean Rohasic is in. Quote, Jay Stu, the guy who let Toby in Houston through. Good point. Jamie in Green Bay tweets, that Jay Stu call is so bad, it's actually good. How many times have we all said, keep calling, weaklings, over the years? Weaklings. The Nut is in. Stuck Nut made his jungle debut yesterday. Finally. He writes, thanks for the Jay Stu reset. I feel better about myself. That's why I do that. So you can all feel better about yourselves. And for me to reiterate that point, this is the guy who is screening every telephone call and telling you you're not good enough. The guy who made this call.
I know this is probably walking the thin line of blasphemy.
Only Stu had the nerve, man, and the courage to, quote, walk the thin line of blasphemy.